Hello there. My name is Marco, and if you are still hungry for some news thoughts about Tesla Q1 earnings, then you are in luck because that's exactly what I'm going to talk about with you today. Um, I have some notes and I have some thoughts about it, and it was just, it was so interesting. A lot of new information was really presented, and especially it's interesting because Wall Street apparently didn't like what they heard. So the price was down a bit, but for smart investors who are thinking longer term, you just want to pay attention to the company and how the company is doing, their performance, and if they're on track for their longer term goals. And after this Q1 earnings 2021, I'm more confident than ever that Tesla is going to be the biggest company in the world, that they're going to dominate the automobile market as well as open up into new markets, the energy sector, uh, the two largest total addressable markets they are. I'm confident that they're going to dominate them. And the day to day stock price is something you can't really think about, even shorter term, 6 months to a year. Macroeconomics could change. We could have interest rates rise. We could decide, because the JPOW decides inflation is here sooner. Politics change, but speaking of politics, some nice legislation coming in. The infrastructure plan is huge for Tesla. I'm going to talk about that in another video. But for this one, we're going to talk about Q1 earnings. So, yeah, let's do that. All right, so mostly what I'm going to talk about is the investor questions and the responses that got from Elon and Zach and some of the other people who were there on the call. And if you want to kind of get their opening remarks, you should take a look at the investor deck. The PDF had some good info, kind of to summarize, or of course, it's still on YouTube and you can watch it. And I could put a link to that in the description below. The save version, or not the save version, but Clean Electric did a really good version of it as well. All right, so first question was about Dojo. I think that was from Rob Maurer as well. He's really good, Tesla Daily. Love him, keep up to date. So some of my key takeaways from this part is that Tesla has been writing their own neural net software, and this is new. This is only recently they were talking about they're trying to get to this point, but this is the first time I've heard Elon or anyone at Tesla say they have this working in practice, which is that they recently wrote an auto-labeling neural net, which is huge for how they train their full self-driving software brain. Neural nets, kind of like your brain is kind of like a neural net. Cameras are kind of like eyes. There's a lot of neural nets are similar, modeled after the human brain. But before I digress too much, so they really want to do auto labeling because it's labor intensive. Otherwise, you have people who have to look at every object in a video frame that they get from the car, this data, and if it makes a mistake, they have to manually look at, it draws a box around everything. They have to manually look at things and label what they are. This is a car, this is a person, this is two people inside one trench coat, don't let them fool you, something like that. So that's very labor intensive, slows down the training process, and makes it more expensive. So they also wrote, to train the neural net, they wrote a neural net to label the data for their other neural net, so that neural net is also going to improve. They have this feedback mechanism where that neural net tries to label stuff on its own, and then they have people who check that and say if that was good, what that neural net did or not, and that is improving that neural net. So once that neural net gets good enough to the point where it's like a very high success rate on labeling things, then that's going to dramatically improve the pace that their neural net is going to be able to improve. Thus, the updates are going to be much better that get pushed out to the cars. The cars are going to be much better about reacting right in all circumstances. Especially as new data comes in, it'll be able to adapt faster. Very, very important. And overall, Dojo improves that all the neural nets, because Dojo is basically them building their own supercomputer, which is super efficient. They're able to build it themselves cheaper than what they could buy off the shelf. And so in terms of dollar cost for them and the dollar cost to run it, much cheaper, and it's going to be custom built for their application, which is big because computer hardware, like if you know anything about crypto mining, there's certain graphics cards, certain hardware that is specifically suited to that, and it's all about custom tailoring to what you want to do. So, very exciting that this is telling me that their neural nets are going to be improving on a much faster. That's a great setup. Just kind of removing more of the human element and speeding this whole artificial intelligence improvement cycle up. There's some other notes. Let's see. There's a 10x cost efficiency in the hardware, and Elon specifically said in the energy per frame, because he's like, how do I say this exactly? So energy per frame of video compared to the next best thing they could buy, which is like off the shelf, server like space or computer hardware racks, server racks. Neural net computing is taking over. So I got my notes behind here. It's taking over more of the available compute power. Okay, that's a good sign. So they have a computer, right? And the computer has so much ability, so much bandwidth to compute things. And it's split up into sections. So a good chunk of it is the neural net, is most of it, but some of it is also used for other parts, like pre-processing maybe the video signal, or doing some other type of calculations. Or maybe, they're like, let's have regular code, like that's not on the neural net, that doesn't work with a neural net, because that's kind of like a special thing. You could go super deep into neural nets. That's what's changing the world the fastest right now, really. So basically, he said that that's becoming more of, taking up more of, they're relying on it more, it's becoming more valuable. And also, I got the impression that that they already kind of wish that they had more power, like that they had a more powerful computer in the car, as well as them building Dojo, which is kind of like their computer back at home base, which is at the factory, which is used to train and then push out the new software to the cars. But the cars, if they have better computers, which will be the next gen of hardware on chips with better, smaller, like 5 nanometer production process or whatever the newest is, and it's going to be a huge upgrade in computing power available, even for the same amount of power draw wattage when they upgrade. So I got the hint, like, they're working with it, and previously they've said like this is like way above what we need. Like our hardware right now it's so much better than what we had before. We don't really, we have way more than what we need, so we're not worried. Now I have the feeling they're thinking like, okay, we realize these neural nets, like they could just take as much compute power as you could throw at them, and they love it, and they keep doing better, and it's just it makes for a better computer the more powerful it is. The software, it just gets so much better. It's like usually there's some kind of sliding scale of a break-even point. Like you invest so much more, but the performance only goes up by this much. But maybe with neural nets, they're at the point already where it's kind of hitting the limit, and they're like, oh man, if we added a new computer and it was this much more cost and it was this much more capable, then the neural net, the software that decides how the car drives, could come really follow it up almost all the way. Maybe not 1-to-1 ratio, but it could come from here, up to like here type of thing, which would be a huge improvement. So that's always something that's a constraint that they got to work on with how much compute power they got. And, it's a drain on the battery and all that. Of course, they're way ahead of people using LiDAR and all that nonsense. And they're not going to use radar anymore. I don't know how much power the radar uses. If that uses a lot of power, that'd be awesome to just kind of shut that stuff off and just focus on the cameras, which I'm guessing uses the least power out of all their sensors. That's about most of my thoughts on the dojo question. Without looking at it again, these are kind of like I'm going off of my notes here. So what's next? Solar roof. Solar roof price was increased recently, and people were a little discouraged about that. Elon said change company policy, where now people want power walls. Those are the excuse me, I'm gonna take a sip here because I need to wet the gullet. With me, no fancy cuts. You get the unfiltered live version of Marco, hydrating himself, going on weird tangents, thinking I'll just keep talking. I don't even know what I'm going to say in the next second. Who knows what I'm going to say? Farfanugan, bicycle, tricycle, microphone. I don't know. That's what I'm looking at. Amazing stuff. All right, anyway, so power walls. That's their batteries that they sell along with backup power storage, and they can do a thing called energy arbitrage, where you're able to store up power when it's cheap on the grid, or maybe it's cheap for you to use power, and then at a certain other time of the day, like peak times, like 3 to 6 o'clock, you could use more energy from your battery. Carbonation. Use more energy from your battery because you'll save money because electricity is more expensive at that point. So there's a lot of reasons that you want a battery, and this was actually huge. This was like probably the #1 moment of the call that made me go like, oh my God, this is such a simple thing, but it's going to make a huge difference. I got really excited when Elon, and you could tell Elon got excited too, when he expanded. He went from the solar roof and he expanded way out, big picture, into what the whole U.S. infrastructure and kind of the world global infrastructure is going to look like in the future. With all these new electric vehicles, they're going to need a lot more electricity, and kind of this is why this good infrastructure plan is coming out, because we are not supplying enough electricity to houses right now for every house to have an electric vehicle, and they come home after work and plug in their cars and want to charge up their cars all at the same time, and there's 300 million of those suddenly added. The grid would literally explode if there weren't like a safety measure, so they would probably just like shut it down, otherwise it would explode. So then they shut down the grid and everyone would have no power. So in that case, you wish you'd have a power wall and solar panels so that you could still run. But this is coincidentally, fortuitously, having solar panels and a power wall is going to mitigate this issue. That's going to supply a lot of the power in the future that we are going to need, that the United States grid will need extra power coming from houses, because it's just going to be way too much money for them. They're going to have to scale. I mean, they're still going to have to add extra power generation and from clean renewable sources like wind and solar energy, because the planet is going to turn into a hellhole if, CO2 emissions still continue. So it's that, and it's also our health and pollution, and we don't want natural gas, coal power plants, and nuclear is a nightmare as well. Maybe a little bit, and if they have newer, better designs that are safer, yeah. But it's going to be mostly solar and wind, and then you need battery to back that up because those aren't 100%. So they're going to have to build that up, and then they're going to need all kinds of extra power lines and Elon was talking about this. They'd have to build so much more power generation, so many more power lines, so many more batteries so fast that he thinks it's just a nightmare, and there's no way that the utilities will be able to do this on their own. It's like, if we really want to be serious here and make an impact on everyone for the positive, we got to move fast. We can't move slow. None of this pansy stuff, okay? That's over. We're done with. We're moving forward. We're actually doing things now, okay? So it can't just come from the government side of trying to build up utilities and all that. It's got to come from the individual, small business, big business side as well of Tesla and maybe other companies that pop up, building up solar generation at everyone's house and having batteries as well, which is so important to connect those two so that those can handle all this increased electricity that we're going to need. And in a good way, it will be great. That's the most cost-efficient way to do it. It's the best way for everyone. So this got started anyways with the solar roof question. Was like, the price went up and people are like, oh, that sucks. Like, how come, Elon? And Elon's like, well, yeah, it does suck. Demand is still higher than we can install, so still more people want them, even though we had to raise the price a lot. There's no shortage of customers apparently. I want to say that first. And he was just like, there's big roofs have big differences. When you got a simple roof, it's not that big a deal, but as soon as you get a little complicated with more things sticking up out of a roof, it's you got to stop and you got to cut around it, and it's way more work. And that's a lot of labor costs for the install crew. So it just becomes much, much more expensive. And they're trying to be, automate as much of the process of like estimating the cost of the roof and use like, satellite imagery and, software and stuff like that. So, they're kind of new to this. That's not quite tweaked in yet. They're still trying to make the solar glass roof, cheaper and easier to install and all that. I think the housing should change how we build houses. We have to build houses cheaper, faster, and better, and that really hasn't changed much in a long time. And it really needs to, because we have a huge housing problem in this country. It's way too expensive. But that costs more. So that's basically why prices had to go up. And he's like, now we're going to have just a power wall is going to have to be bundled with solar. So because they're doing this, though, one, it's going to really end up better for people to have that in the first place. Maybe it'll be more expensive up front, which kind of sucks, but they might have to. I think they can also lower the price a bit, because this is going to make their install much simpler because, and hold for dramatic pause here, because they have like this mishmash of dealing with how any house is wired up. Here's a quote from him. He says, "Every house looks the same electrically instead of being unique works of art. And this is because the battery, the power wall, is being put in between the grid and the house. And then the solar panels only feed the battery. So now you're able to separate out the wiring of the house from the installation. Like before, they're kind of getting all up in there and had to make everything work together in kind of this more convoluted way. Now, because the battery is always going to be there, they can plan for this more streamlined install system where no matter what, the solar panels will just put power into the battery, and then the battery can decide, do I feed power into the house, or do I hold it, or do I send it back to the grid? and hopefully your local laws and stuff give you a good rate on that. So this is huge because, like I was saying earlier, it's going to be very important for the future that we have this extra power generation. And this is this it sounds so simple. It sounds so simple, but it's going to make it so much easier to install in people's homes. This is going to look way more attractive to people. It's going to be it's a win for everyone, really. You don't need to mess with the circuit breakers of the house, upgrading the panels, all this nonsense, extra inverters, gateways. It should all just be built into the power wall and the solar system. So what else? The Powerwall 2, it's now the Powerwall 2 Plus. They made improvements, so now it's able to deliver more power than before. This is important because, for example, now maybe it could provide enough power to start up like an air conditioning unit, which takes a lot of power to start it up. It takes a lot. That's why they have these things called capacitors. And then it jumps down after you start it, and it still uses up a lot of power as you run it, but not as much as when you first start it. So you need to deliver a lot of power when you first start it, and then it goes down a little bit, but then you need to still deliver a lot of steady state power. So it looks like from the specs, they basically doubled the peak power the battery can generate, and the consistent power is also doubled that the battery can generate. So that's awesome. That's a huge improvement. If more people are able to, in case there's backup power or they just want to use the cheaper electricity from the battery, if you can also run your air conditioning unit, central AC unit or heat off of the battery, one especially, maybe you need, hopefully you don't need two, but if you have a big system, maybe two would make more sense just to be extra safe. That could really keep you going if there's no power and you're in like a hot climate or a cold climate. You need those things to work, or you're in trouble. So very cool, very important. Just going through some of the stuff I said here. So distributed utility peak power demand is profound and necessary. So this goes to the idea of utilities should be decentralized and distributed, so that you're not counting on just a couple power plants to supply to everyone at peak power when everyone turns on all their stuff, their AC, their heat, all their appliances. That needs to be decentralized. It just makes more sense. It would be a nightmare to build it up otherwise, just all centralized. And it's also more secure that way. There's a lot of good things to it. It's less power lines. It's more secure to hacks, to attacks. National security wise. If someone blows up a power plant and it's like a huge giant solar thing and it powers half the country, and you take it out, that's a big problem if it's all in one place, I guess. But if that happens, probably we got bigger problems anyway, so I hope that never happens. What else? So otherwise, increased electricity needs would be a nightmare to all come from utilities. We need roughly 2 to 3 times the electricity we have now to cover all cars being electric, and for heating and cooling going all electric. Off of renewable power, I believe, is what he was talking about. For that to work, we need batteries and roughly 2 to 3 times the electricity generation that the U.S. grid has now, which is, doubling or tripling that stuff takes time. It takes a lot of work, a lot of labor, a lot of materials to get that all installed and working correctly. So this should benefit big time from the infrastructure bill. I think this is kind of really speaks to the heart of that and takes care of a big problem with transitioning to green energy, is that we need this extra clean electricity generation, and hopefully it's the law is set up so that Tesla is able not only to make electric cars more affordable to consumers, but to also make it much more affordable for us to choose to install solar panels and batteries at our house, because it's good for us, it's good for utilities, it's good for the government, it's good for our health, it's good for the health of the planet and long-term health of future generations, economic activity, depression levels. I mean, the list goes on. It's good. So yeah, then we wouldn't need massive increases in power lines, power plants, substations, because we got local solar and battery, and it's hopefully they're able to keep bringing down the prices on their batteries with their own cell production, Tesla, and solar technology is continuing to improve, and so that whole system should come down in cost. And then you lower the labor cost by making it a more simple installation that should be kind of cookie cutter, the same for every house. You don't need to go in and analyze every house, how it's wired. You got old houses, you got all kinds of different builders do it. There's no standardized things in a lot of cases. I mean, there is, but it can be a nightmare. So it gets rid of all that complexity, a lot cheaper, cookie cutter, same for every house. Tesla, solar and battery for this house, install solar and battery the same way for this house. So that's just going to make the whole process work much better. So yeah, so when I was hearing that part, I got pretty excited. This is awesome, and I definitely am. I'm currently in a townhouse with an HOA, but in the future I hope to move into a home, and I can get solar panels, solar roof. Sounds like that's kind of more of like a luxury product still, unless you're like in a high-end house or you have a really expensive roof anyways. If you're going to replace an asphalt roof, even on an older house, from like the 70s or something, like that's like a couple grand, versus a solar roof would be like, I'm not sure how much it is, like 30, 40,000. Well, I mean, hopefully the incentives from the government come in and help out with that, and not just tax credits, because, if you don't make enough money, that doesn't help you with tax credits. So they should have focus more on rebates to just bring down the cost up front, and, maybe people can swing it with their income and payments, and have good interest rates and all that. Yeah, really cool stuff. So, all right. We got a lot more questions, a lot to go. So, yeah. So the length of the video is getting a bit long. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this up into two parts. Don't worry though, I'm going to release them at the same time, so you won't have to wait in case you do want to go through the whole thing if you're a super Tesla nerd like I am and you're just hungry for as much Tesla insights and information as you can, because you want to invest everything you have into the stock, and it's going to help you improve your financial situation in the future. Then worry not, because part 2 will be available whenever you see this one. So I'll have I should be able to put in a playlist, and obviously if you look at my channel, part 2 will be right there. So all right, well, hopefully you enjoyed this so far. Please support the channel, give me a thumbs up, like, subscribe if you want to hear more. Consider checking out my Patreon, or using some of my affiliate links to help me out. And I'll see you in part 2.